AITA for letting my colleague waste money he was about to desperately need because I knew he was about to get fired? My colleague was a genuinely nice person. Worked hard, performed well and was good to me generally. He had been at the firm for more than 2 decades and I and everyone else liked him. He had a wife with expensive tastes, 2 kids in private school and a fairly hefty mortgage. I was surprised and disappointed when my boss told me that I would be taking over his section next month and to start subtly rescheduling my work accordingly. This was strictly hush-hush, and if word got out my boss would know it was me that leaked it and I'd have got canned. I understood that this sucked for my colleague, but them's the breaks and I was fine with keeping it to myself. Until it was his 50th birthday a fortnight before he was going to be let go. He tells me he has set aside a 6-figure sum to make it the most extravagant and lavish experience of his life. Private jets, VIP events all weekend, luxury cars, open bars, etc. My immediate reaction was to tell him not to do it, that he'd regret it, that this was decadent and wasteful, etc. He said he knew all that, but he'd been having a really tough time of it of late, and that he had never done anything remotely like this for himself his entire life. And that he had earned the right to finally do something for himself, after all was putting his wife and kids first. I told him that I would never do this, that he'd regret it, that it wasn't worth it, and so on, but I did not tell him that he was about to be fired. It wouldn't have stopped him getting fired, but it would have meant I would have been and possibly ended my entire career in this industry too. But it might have meant he didn't blow his entire life savings immediately prior to becoming unemployed. This has all happened now and he was let go, but this keeps me awake at night. Should I have told him what was about to happen and AITA for not letting him know? Nah, this is one of those situations that just sucks, but hey, it is what it is. If telling him could have put your job in jeopardy, there's really nothing you could have done about it. And hey, you at least tried to warn him in a roundabout way. NTA your boss is a bit of an asshole for putting you in the position, knowing your colleague was going to be fired. I get that this is normal, I just hate when bosses put that pressure on people. You couldn't have done anything more than what you did without getting yourself fired. It sucks, but you have to put yourself first sometimes. Nah, except for your employer. Not for letting the guy go. Sometimes layoffs are necessary, even when it comes to long-time employees. Your employer is here for deciding and telling you a month in advance. The least they could do for an employee of 20+ years is give him as much advance notice as possible. You were between a rock and a hard place, and it was not your place to break the news to him. The only thing you could possibly have done is talk to your boss about potentially accelerating the notification to your former co-worker. NTA. He behaved foolishly while you acted in self-preservation. You did what you could to warn him. You don't owe him anything beyond that, especially when it could threaten your economic situation. Info. What type of company tells other people you're going to be laid off before you? Especially people that aren't your direct superiors. Nah. I'd like to believe he has enough funds set aside at 50 to at least care for himself and his family if he's willing to be that extravagant. If not, then he's an asshole. You definitely tried your best to convince him without ruining your own life, so you're definitely not an asshole. Nah, you need to protect your job, that's the first priority. If he wants to spend savings on something like that, then it's his choice. He could have been sensible and saved some rainy day money. None of this is on you. Nah. His choice. Anyone can lose their job at any time. And he's in his 50s. Surely future retirement was in his game plan. And the phrase set aside makes me think that wasn't all his savings, right? Do you know why he was let go? It's not like he could have been a sucky employee after working there for 20 years. Fuck me if that isn't a kick in the teeth. Nah, if he set aside a 6-figure sum for a lavish weekend, then he's A, wealthy, well-educated enough that he can afford to be laid off and find a new job. B, incredibly stupid and poorly educated financially. It would be one thing if he was laid off and he was about to splurge on something necessary, like a retirement vehicle or an expensive college fund or paying off his mortgage, but he's blowing his money on private jets and open bars. Not your job to protect him from incredibly stupid and wasteful financial decisions. No job is ever 100% secure, and he should have known there may be consequences. NTA. You can't set yourself on fire to keep him warm. You did all you could to try and stop him without ruining your future career prospects. Nah, except your boss, he thought that status quo would remain status quo and wanted to do something special. You wanted to help him out, but there was no real way to do it. Your boss is the real asshole here for telling you and putting that weight on your shoulders. There's a reason that HR departments exist, it's to shield people in the trenches from having to worry about political bullshit. It really sounds like you are a good person, but we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because you obviously work in a horrible industry that deserves its horrible reputation. How do you not fear becoming this man? Depressed and shitcanned on your 50th birthday. Nah, except for boss man. Nah. Jeopardizing your career to prevent someone else's frivolous spending would be a noble deed, but I can't imagine anyone who could have expected you to. Why didn't you tell your boss what your colleagues' plans were so he would know before wasting the money? Sorry if this was asked and answered. Info: I'm not quite sure. Are you really sure you would be fired? Are there other ways you could have told him? It's really hard to make a decision on this one. I'd say your boss is the asshole. But also, on a real note, find a new job, because if they're willing to do this to someone who is performing well, I'd be worried about your future there. Maybe you could have told your bosses your concerns, that the dude was about to shell out 6 figures on a party. And maybe they ought to give him some idea. I would go with nah, since, clearly the other guy isn't an asshole either. It's a tough one, but ultimately, you have your own career to think of. You did make an effort to steer him away from that path without revealing the truth. And the fact that you are still cut up about the decision even when it could have ended badly for you shows you have a moral compass. Regardless of employment situation, he must have known that blowing his savings on a one-and-done event was a bad idea. If he decided to go ahead with it anyway, I don't know if telling him would have changed much. Automod: the following is a copy of the above post. This comment is a record of the above post as it was originally written, in case the post is deleted or edited. My colleague was a genuinely nice person. Worked hard, performed well, and was good to me generally. He had been at the firm for more than 2 decades, and I and everyone else liked him. He had a wife with expensive tastes, 2 kids in private school, and a fairly hefty mortgage. I was surprised and disappointed when my boss told me that I would be taking over his section next month and to start subtly rescheduling my work accordingly. This was strictly hush-hush, and if word got out, my boss would know it was me that leaked it, and I'd have got canned. I understood that this sucked for my colleague, but them's the breaks, and I was fine with keeping it to myself. Until it was his 50th birthday, a fortnight before he was going to be let go. He tells me he has set aside a 6-figure sum to make it the most extravagant and lavish experience of his life. Private jets, VIP events all weekend, luxury cars, open bars, etc. My immediate reaction was to tell him not to do it, that he'd regret it, that this was decadent and wasteful, etc. He said he knew all that, but he'd been having a really tough time of it of late, and that he had never done anything remotely like this for himself his entire life, and that he had earned the right to finally do something for himself, after all was putting his wife and kids first. I told him that I would never do this, that he'd regret it, that it wasn't worth it, and so on, but I did not tell him that he was about to be fired. It wouldn't have stopped him getting fired, but it would have meant I would have been and possibly ended my entire career in this industry too. But it might have meant he didn't blow his entire life savings immediately prior to becoming unemployed. This has all happened now and he was let go, but this keeps me awake at night. Should I have told him what was about to happen and AITA for not letting him know? I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit message composed to =r amethyst hole if you have any questions or concerns. Nah. You had a duty to protect yourself. Your life and livelihood were at stake just as much, if not more than his. You did what you could, but that is where it stops. NTA, and stop worrying about this situation, because in the end the only person we need to be worrying about is ourselves. It sucks, but that's how it is sometimes. Nah, it is just a shitty situation to be in, but even if you told him he was going to get fired regardless, right? Plus he has to be an idiot to spend that much unless he was a celebrity or a billionaire or something. I'd feel a little bad, but you didn't owe him anything. You live with the decisions you make. Nah. You were put in a damned if you do damned if you don't situation. There was no winning. Nah. You were damned if you did and damned if you didn't. Absolutely nah. You gotta balance the best and worst case scenarios. You could have kept your job or lost your job. He was going to lose his job no matter what. He would have lost his job and still had 100k, or he was going to lose his job and not have that 100k, but have the party of a lifetime. There's no scenario where you both keep your job. So, is it really worth both of you losing your jobs, or you having to work with these people under a cloud of suspicion, just for him to have an extra 100k in the bank and no party? You're beating yourself up for not taking a risk that was absolutely not worth the potential benefit. I have no idea what to vote. I'm so conflicted because I want to say you suck, but you imply this man wouldn't have been able to go down like that without confronting the boss. Which means you would have been outed. Boss is a real asset to tell you that in the first place. Info. Location? It's no different than if the guy blew his paycheck every week, figuring the money will still come in. He just happened to do it all at once. You gave him decent advice. If he doesn't heed, then that's on him. But you should take that example to heart and keep it in mind. Your boss is not trustworthy. Nah. You tried, man. You really did, and that's the best you could do. I mean, if he's wasting his entire life savings on a party, he probably wasn't going to be making any sound decisions anyway. Hopefully that was far from his life savings. It seems likely he has much more saved, but you have a better idea of his income than I do, so what do I know? Who fucking spends 100,000 on their birthday? Like WTF. This is Nobby Weary, my friend. One day it could be your 50th birthday party, and some other newer younger person will be subtly taking over your work shit. Just saying. Nah. Hopefully he didn't blow all of his emergency fund, but if he did, that's on him and no one else. Everyone should, if possible, save up for a rainy day, because you never know when your money flow might come to a screeching halt. Nah, I would have told him though. You shouldn't be worried about losing your job over telling him about this. You should already be concerned about keeping your job. If they are willing to remove a 20-year employee so abruptly and unprofessionally, who's to say that won't be you in a couple of years? Do you want to work with a company like that? Make the company a better environment to work for by telling him and not leaving him in the dark at this possibly now financially stable time. Would really suck if he had to take his kids out of private school because of his party extravaganza. NTA, you should definitely not invest too much time with such a company. Look how they acted against a guy who worked there for 2 decades. Look out for yourself. Nah. His finances aren't your responsibility. Having set aside 6 figures set aside for a party, but having nothing set aside for a rainy day is just childishly irresponsible. Having several months of savings just in case you can't work is the first major savings you should have. Even if he wasn't about to be fired, anything could have happened that resulted in him not being able to work, such as an accident or the company he works for tanking. No job is safe. NTA, I feel terrible for both you and your colleague. That said, your colleague did an incredibly, unbelievably foolish thing in this day and age by blowing that money. Nobody's job is safe any longer, and I'm sure he is aware that men over 50 are in the most danger of losing their jobs. Past performance is no guarantee of anything, and if they need someone gone, someone is going. I still can't believe he did that when he has a wife and kids, mortgage, etc. But if it was me, I would gone to my boss and talked to him about it to see if he could resolve the situation, because he could tell your colleague without you losing your job. You'd also show commitment and trust to your company while also showing you are a good guy. NTA, by telling him you would have put yourself in a bad position. Firing him was a business decision, not telling him was also a business decision. Him spending all that cash is a personal decision. You don't know his personal financial situation, maybe he still has millions on the bank. I believe your best course of action would have been to talk your boss into letting him know early. AITA. I don't blame you for not telling him, because obviously it would have put your job in jeopardy, and I respect always putting yourself first, but couldn't you have at least told your boss what he was planning? Maybe if you told your boss would have actually told him he was getting fired so he didn't spend all that money. And even if your boss decided to do nothing, you would at least know you tried. Nah, Jesus, where the heck do you work for people to have money for that kind of stuff? I would never save all my money over years and years and then use it like that unless I was dying. My first thought was maybe he knew he was being let go and the boss and him decided to test you to see if you were loyal to them or something. Again, not sure where you work, and this obviously isn't a professional way of doing this, but rich people. It honestly isn't your place to tell someone when they are being fired, and it causes gossip. For all you know, the boss could have changed his mind by the time the date to do it rolled around and just demoted him instead. Not in this case, but you get what I'm saying. It wasn't your place, so you handled it right. And that guy is allowed to do what he wants with his money. It sucks he decides to do that right before he lost his job, but it was a bad choice on his part. He had to have known he wasn't doing a great job at work. Now you tried to warn him as much as you could, but you couldn't throw your job aside to do it. The only asshole in this situation would be your boss. They never should have put you in that situation. NTA, you actually did try to stop him. And the reason you stopped short of telling him he'd get fired was to protect your own job, which you needed as much as he did his. He wasn't an asshole either, just an idiot. I think your boss was, though, for putting you in that position for 2 weeks. Because bankers. You shouldn't torpedo your career for anyone. You told him it was a bad idea multiple times, and the only thing that could have stopped him was saying something you shouldn't, which would have got you in trouble too. The asshole is the firm that wants to let go a well-performing, hard-working, good person who's been with them for 2 decades. Unless there's something they're not telling you about him, like if he's stealing from the company or something, I honestly would rethink loyalty to a company that's willing to not only do this, but conspire about it for at least weeks before doing it. Maybe they would have done nothing, but you would have done the best you could, and you didn't even think of that. Edit. I am changing my vote from not the asshole though, AITA, because you probably have approached your boss and told him your coworker informed you he'd be blowing his life savings for his 50th birthday because he assumes he has many more years working here and giving them the opportunity to lay him off early, or at least let him know early if possible. Edit X2. That said, for 2 decades of work and a no-notice layoff, in most areas he'd be entitled to quite the severance package by law, so he'll probably be fine despite this, for the record. NTA. Your boss never should have made you aware of this, that was totally inappropriate. You tried to warn your colleague, and he's a 50-year-old man who needs to be responsible for his own contingency plans. If it helps, maybe the birthday extravaganza will be the happy memory he holds onto while job searching? NTA. This way, he would be in dire straits regardless. At least by not knowing, he was able to splurge some on himself a bit before dealing with life's realities. Also, you said he had set aside the 6-figure sum. That kind of implies that was not all he had. Your job sounds awful, and you should probably be ready to get the same sort of treatment one day. Well, less your job and more your employer. Nah. The situation sucks, but you did right. I hope that you guys got in touch after, as it would be a shame to lose a good relationship. Surely they cannot just fire him. Do you guys not get redundancy payout in America? If he has enough to spend a 6-figure sum, he's obviously in a sought-after job and skilled, so should easily be able to find work. Nah, except the boss. I mean, what can you do? There's no solution here that benefits both of you. The boss shouldn't have told you in the first place, as he makes you feel like the bad guy even though you're not. This is American, you can tell by the fact that the worker has no rights. NTA. Your boss pit you two against each other in this regard. Boss AITA. Nah, look at it this way. You could not stop him without losing your job, so you did what you could. He would never be able to waste this money if he knew and he wanted to do so. I actually think he will not regret this in the long run. So do you know if he was being fired for cause, as in, he gone done fucked up? Or if it was just some sort of bureaucratic wankery, possibly, he's hit retirement age and they're handing him a golden parachute? It's a tough situation, and you're definitely NTA. I probably wouldn't have even told him not. I find it hard to believe that somebody who can make enough to blow that much cash on a party is dumb enough to not have more in savings. NTA. If you told you would be out of the job too. Nah, but another example for how much US sucks in regard to workers' rights. With 20 years under the belt, it would not have been possible to let this guy go without notice in Germany or any other country in the EU. If they wanted to prevent him from working with other companies, they would have had to keep paying him full salary while suspending him from work for a couple of months. That's the only way. But that's fair. 20 years means at least 6-month notice before letting him go. NTA, that would have been a serious breach, and you were right for taking that seriously and keeping the information confidential. However, you should never have been put in that position in the first place, so your boss is the asshole here. NTA. You don't control others' actions. NTA. His poor money management isn't your problem. Adults don't go planning extravaganzas like this unless they have the cash on hand and the savings to support it. Nah, it sucks, but spending on six figures on a single weekend is a terrible financial decision, regardless of whether he was getting fired or not. Nah. But I gotta question, six figures for the weekend, what are we talking about here? AITA. I know I'm going against the grain here, but I believe being a good person is more important than any one job. Remember, corporations have no conscience. If they thought they could raise their stock price 0.5% by shit-canning you right now, they'd do it in a heartbeat. Corporations are not your allies. I told him that I would never do this, that he'd regret it, that it wasn't worth it, and so on, but I did not tell him that he was about to be fired. NTA, your boss is for putting you in that horrible position and for being a fucking coward and slimeball, but ultimately your coworker is the person who chose to spend that money, even if I can see his side too. But not 6 figures worth. What is this industry, out of curiosity? Finance? Did he really spend that much money on a party? Who has 6 figures to spend on a fucking birthday? The boss is the asshole but may not understand it himself. The productive thing to do would be to go tell the boss about the college's plans and tell the boss he needs to tell the coworker. NTA. Nothing you could do. He'll get another job and look back fondly on the experience he gave himself, I'm sure. Nah, is it that easy? Can people in the US? Did you inform your boss of his plan? Maybe they would have intervened in some way. I would have gone to the boss and told them what your colleague was planning on doing. Leave it up to them to tell the colleague not to spend so much, that way, you've done what you can and at least you're in the clear. But mainly NTA, I guess. NTA. I'm about 12 years into my working career, and I never will fool myself into thinking today couldn't be the day I find myself without employment. I wouldn't spend that kind of money unless I had considerable private wealth. My firm of 36,000 laid off 1,000 employees from 2 major divisions. Many of the holders' employees I knew who got laid off had luxury cars and 300k plus homes. Now you not only shouldn't but actually couldn't tell him. You shouldn't because that's between him and your employer, you shouldn't interfere. But you couldn't anyway because, as you pointed out, your own job would be at risk. It's up to him to prepare for being fired, nobody likes to think about it, but at the end of the day it's always on the cards. Blowing the money you have saved is something you do knowing that if anything goes wrong, you're fucked. That's not on you, relax. If he wants to blow 6 figures like that while sitting on a big mortgage, expensive tuitions, and whatever else he has for debt, let him. Personally, I think that's irresponsible and stupid, regardless of his impending job loss. But for all you know, he's got other assets to help him with the fallout. NTA. If someone else wants to spend their entire savings on a trip when they also have a wife and kids to be responsible for, that's their problem. Also, he can get a new job. NTA. What kind of fucking moron who should be planning on retiring in 15 years blows their life savings on a giant party? He's incredibly irresponsible, and you shouldn't lose a moment's sleep for his own idiotic decisions biting him in the ass. Isn't it illegal for an employer to discuss the impending firing of an employee with other non-managers? Maybe in some states. Nah. Except our work office culture, fuck that shit. NTA. It's his fault for not having enough savings to cover events like a job loss, illness, etc., especially since he was making so much money. Nah, the only asshole is the boss. I don't know the position, but usually colleagues will only find out on the same day or even within minutes of the person being fired. Usually to prevent awkwardness like this or the news slipping out. You were in a difficult position and made the only decision you could to protect yourself and your job. So. Your employers are tough for telling you. You have no responsibility for the dude, but as a human being, I don't understand how you could not tell him. Lose your job? There must be laws protecting you from that, because there are laws protecting that guy from your employers telling you, No, I don't understand when someone knows something that could ruin a good person's life and not do anything about it. Everybody praises heroes, but most are not willing to do the job themselves. Anyways, with Mahesh you're not quite top or see you participated into making that guy's life worse since you could have said something, but you didn't. Instead, you chose to preserve your own comfort, and that's okay too. AITA you couldn't explain to your manager that he needs to tell this person immediately before he fucks his life even harder than just losing a job. Is this company and manager so morally bankrupt that they would still let this person go through with this knowing this information? What does that say about you that this job is worth so much to you that you would do that to another person? Nah. He's living above his means and that was really stupid of him. You tried to warn him. AITA. You chose loyalty to a despicable company that lacked the common decency to tell an employee he was being fired laid off with a month's notice over basic human decency towards a colleague you knew was about to make a major, financially critical act. I noticed that you didn't even pretend in this post that you argued vehemently about that with the boss, so clearly you didn't, as supported by the sucks to be him tone of your write-up. You also conveniently assume that no one else in the company knew about this firing, so 100% blame would go to you, and you would 100% be fired. I call BS on your cowardice, the direction of your loyalty, and your moral compass. It should be keeping you up at night. Down vote away. You feel guilty for a reason. NTA but your ex-co-worker is for wasting so much money on his birthday.